After a fairly testy end-of-the-year presser, the Bruins are heading into a pivotal offseason. New coach to hire, contracts to lock in, a draft pick to hit on, and big decisions are coming very, very fast.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode, we're going to briefly touch on the end of the year presser, but also focus on what is coming next, including a coaching hire, roster retool, and hitting on the first round draft pick, a point at which we don't exactly know where they're going to be picking, but it's essential that they get the best available player. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years, was a full-time hockey news writer for thescore.com for 5 years, and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. Now, this morning, I woke up and over my morning coffee, I listened to the 32 Thoughts podcast segment on the Boston Bruins. And Elliot Friedman, Kyle Bukauskas were talking about the relatively testy nature of the press conference, the sensitivity and defensiveness displayed by Don Sweeney and Cam Neely while being grilled by Bruins media, and rightfully so. I guess on both ends. I mean, I can't say that when faced with tough evaluations, criticisms, that I too have not gotten defensive and sensitive and taken that posture. So it's kind of understandable in some ways that they were reacting like that. The expectations are high in Boston. Things did not go as they had planned this season. Just remember back in the fall, Cam Neely was talking about how the additions of Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov had been made in order to help them succeed in the playoffs. This team was more playoff ready. They didn't count on the fact that they were not going to make the playoffs. And so many things went off the rails that as we've discussed, and everydayers will know kind of that trajectory that we've talked about here on the podcast before. At the same time, though, as Elliot Friedman pointed out, what's irking fans, and rightfully so, is the fact that if you're putting in place a higher ticket pricing structure, then perhaps have a bit more humility in addressing these issues, right? Like, I just admit some of these failures along the way, or that things could not have gone or could have gone better. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. Nobody's happy with this past season. Nobody's happy with where the team is at the moment. And especially, Friedman noted as well that Sweeney, Cam Neely was sitting right beside him and came out and said, this guy doesn't have a contract extension. I'm still kind of thinking about it. Imagine your boss sitting right next to you and saying that. That's a lot of pressure on you in that moment, a lot of heat that he's likely feeling. And again, it's kind of human nature to have a defensive, sensitive posture in that. But when you're the head of a Original Six hockey club, and again, when you're asking fans to invest more to watch the team next season, maybe just take a step back and be a bit more level-headed about it. Anyways, So I found that to be interesting from that 32 Thoughts podcast, kind of near the end of today's episode there. Now, moving forward, like I said off the top, the Bruins have a lot of big decisions to make. And the first is kind of reestablishing the leadership core as well as building the right bench. Don Sweeney, again, entering the final year of his deal. Neely says he's contemplating next steps, but he's still being tasked with hiring a new coach and kind of resetting the leadership core. Sweeney has said he's looking for someone who blends structure with offensive evolution and can connect with today's players. Friedman on that 32 Thoughts episode kind of pinpointed Jay Leach as the obvious candidate. Yes, a lot of people are asking for someone to come from outside the organization to give some fresh eyes, kind of myself included. But Leach, he was already kind of poached once by the Seattle Kraken. He's well viewed around the NHL, and chances are he could be approached again this offseason by another club. So do they risk losing him once again, that asset, or do they look externally? I think really, if you look at the internal options, there's him, there's Ryan Mugano. Leach should have the upper hand there, with Mugano kind of maybe being the next guy up. But that would probably be a decision for the next general manager, seeing as this is Sweeney's third coaching hire, and general managers very rarely get that opportunity. The next coach will have an opportunity to pick his next captain. With key veterans gone, the Bruins are reestablishing a new leadership group to carry the team forward. Nikita Zadorov, Elias Lindholm will be key parts of that as guys who are signed for the next several years, along with David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, as guys who have been with the team for a while and will still be part of the solution moving forward. So who steps up as the leader? I think we've already seen David Pastrnak do that. We've seen Nikita Zadorov do that. McAvoy was kind of absent from the team, but he obviously has that potential as well to be the next captain. And I would expect that he would at least get an A with David Pastrnak being named or given the C, with Brad Marchand obviously having been traded. He could come back, but that's probably not going to happen, I don't think. That would be really interesting, though, if he re-signs, they give him back the C and kind of pretend that this trade never happened. Anyways, that would be a question for the roster rebuilding part of the offseason conversation, and that's something we'll touch on here as the podcast continues. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming as well, you can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller is required, and it's available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Again, just head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On and get playing with some of the best games available on Xbox. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today we're talking about some of the decisions that are looming for the Boston Bruins this offseason. We've touched on the coaching hire, the possibility of Jay Leach. There's also Ryan Muganel. There's also a bunch of external candidates. And we've touched on this as early as this past Monday, if you want to go back and listen to that episode. What else is Don Sweeney needing to do? Well, one of the big things, of course, will be rebuilding the roster. There's quite a few guys who have left. There's some question marks on the roster at the moment in terms of free agents and who is going to be re-signed. The Bruins lack consistent offense beyond David Pastrnak and Morgan Geeky this season. The power play was a season-long problem. Don Sweeney wants to return to a defensive conviction and also evolve offensively. And I've touched on this a bit yesterday. Like, this is kind of the problem with the Bruins philosophy. They want guys who are like, they want 12 Patrice Bergerons up front, but you have to sprinkle in some guys who are perhaps more defensively minded, some guys who are more physical, some guys who are more skilled, speed, offense first. And maybe they're lacking that kind of balance in the roster. They will be active across the board. Nothing is off the table in order to improve. I mean, you watched that game last night between the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs. You see that pass that Mitch Marner made to Austin Matthews that completely flummoxed Linus Ullmark. There's the still picture of Ullmark looking this way with Marner passing the puck out to Matthews this way, completely lost him. That's the kind of offensive creativity the Bruins desperately need. They'll have the cap space to try to lure a player like Mitch Marner. I mean, throw him $13 million or so. Try to, as much as possible, to bring in a guy like Mitch Marner. Actually, just not a guy like Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner. There aren't many players like him around the NHL, and especially those who would be available at this time. They have to draft with a purpose. Neely, especially, was very testy at the presser about the draft record question that was delivered by Kevin Paul Tupont of the Boston Globe. There was that clip going around of Neely kind of looking at KPD once the presser ended and kind of beckoning him to come over. Elliot Friedman said that's more common than we might think, where an executive will take issue with some questionings, not give him a dressing down per se, but kind of have a bit of a talking to afterwards. No doubt KPD has been around for decades and he stood his ground. It didn't really affect him, I'm sure. But the fact that Neely was that bothered by it, Neely did admit that they can be better and that when you have a top 10 pick, you have to hit on it. The last time the Bruins had a top 10 pick, they did not hit on it. It was prior to Don Sweeney's tenure as general manager. Last year, they drafted 25th. Previous to that, it was 21st, where they took Fabian Lysell. 30th, John Beecher. Last time they were in the top 20 was 2017, where they took Euro Vakanainen. Last time they were in the top 15, they took Charlie McAvoy with the 14th overall pick and Trent Frederick, 29th. Of course, the year before that is the year where everybody questions this team. Zboril, DeBrusk, Senyshyn. People forget they also took Brandon Carlo, who has just flipped for Fraser Minton in a first-round pick. They took Jeremy Lauzon, who's still in the NHL, Dan Vladar. The last time they had a top 10 pick was 2011, where they took Dougie Hamilton. Didn't stick with the team, but obviously that ended up being a great pick. And then, of course, The last time they had a top 5 pick was in 2010, where they selected Tyler Seguin, who was part of the Toronto Maple Leafs trade. Prior to that, when they were really bad in the mid 2000s, they took Phil Kessel with the 5th overall pick, Zach Hamill with the 8th overall pick, and that one did not turn out very well. So the draft is going to be huge for this team. They have to hit on that pick. And let's check the latest mock drafts here for the Bruins on the Tankathon. Have them taking Anton Frondel, center from Djurgårdens over in Europe. NHL mock draft, I believe. Was it Corey Pronman of The Athletic? He had the Bruins, and this is, all dependent on the draft lottery where the Bruins could move up, they could move down. Right now, they would be in the 5 pick, and Pronman has them also taking Frondel, a smart, toolsy center with pro habits and great scoring ability. Boston's center depth makes this a much welcome addition. Could he jump in next season? Probably not. You'd have to get like a Michael Misa maybe to get someone who's going to contribute as early as next season, but they can still get a guy who is going to be an effective player for this team for years to come, and in addition to an ever younger core after they had moved some guys out. So, coach, draft, certainly something they have to address. Scoring, free agency is another area where they need to hit, and we'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. The NBA playoffs are here. Stanley Cup playoffs, Major League Baseball season. There's no better place to get tickets for your favorite live events, whether it's sports, comedy, music, theater, than Game Time. Game Time makes getting in the door easier and more affordable than ever. It's the fastest way to grab playoff tickets or Major League Baseball tickets. Even for those must-see matchups, prices actually drop as the game gets closer. With last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. All-in pricing shows the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and you get a panoramic seat view so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. With their Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected as well, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply, but use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time, last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. I touched on Mitch Marner and trying to add a player of considerable ilk here in the offseason. One guy they do need to lock down is Morgan Geeky. Clearly a building block. Broke out this past season with 33 goals. Sweeney wants him signed long-term after that breakout year. He said we'd prefer to have him on a long-term deal. Had a hell of a year. Again, 33 goals, albeit on a elevated shooting percentage, which, give him the term, but maybe get that cap hit down in order to show that he can repeat this moving forward. Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, and others will get a shot. They'll have to earn their way onto the roster. As Don Sweeney said, they're not just going to hand roles to young players just for the sake of getting younger. Might be a mistake with these guys, especially with their high upsides. Wants to instill that defensive responsibility, having two-way players. One of the big things, though, was that Sweeney wasn't really happy with how players reported to camp last fall and plans to address that head on. Of course, you had Brad Marchand, David Pastrnak, unable to do their full regimens last offseason. Hampus Lindholm had, Elias Lindholm had a back injury. Jeremy Swayman hadn't really been doing a ton to get ready because of his contract situation. All these guys are going to be pressed in the summer to stick to their offseason regimens and come in on day one as optimized as possible. The goal, again, is to be fast, competitive, structured, with more offensive bite, and they're going to have to hit the ground running from day one. There's other decisions to be made on restricted free agents. Morgan Geeky, John Beecher, Marat Hust-Nudinov, and Jacob Lauko are all restricted free agents. Cole Koepke up front is unrestricted. On the back end, you have Henry Jokiharju and Parker Witherspoon as unrestricted free agents. Mason Lohrei as a restricted guy. And then some guys on Providence that you'll have to make decisions on as well. Oliver Wahlstrom, Georgi Merkulov, John Farinacci, among others. And those are restricted free agents. Unrestricted guys include Patrick Brown, Tyler Pitlick, Riley Tufte, Vinny Lettieri. And both of the goalies at the AHL level, Michael DiPietro and Brandon Bussi, are unrestricted free agents. So if you are going to move Joonas Korpisalo, then one of those or both of those guys will have to be retained in order to maintain that depth. With regards to the goaltending, Sweeney wants to return to that defensive conviction and internal pressure between Swayman and Korpisalo or whoever's the backup. Friedman on the 32 Thoughts mentioned that just because you're signed to 1A money doesn't mean that it's going to be handed to you, and the Bruins want to make that clear to Jeremy Swayman as well. Like, he could not or might not play if he's not living up to the expectations of number one goaltender production in the games that he is playing in. So altogether, that is kind of the plan for the Bruins immediately following this testy press conference. And the coaching search already underway. They want to have someone locked in before the draft because that will kind of inform where they look at in the draft, although they should just be taking the best available center. So finding a new coach, fixing their scoring and structure, re-signing Morgan Geeky, hitting on the draft. Those are all things that need to happen here in pretty short order. Anyways, thank you so much for taking time to listen to today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. It's been a bit of a weird week around here with some personal health stuff going on in the family. Heading to Niagara Falls today for my kids' end of the year basketball tournament. 4 games on deck this weekend. They're the number 1 seed in their division, so hopefully they can get it done. Please check out Locked On Game Night next for all the latest from around the NHL. Every night, every game discussed until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Local analysis on a national scale. You can find it on the Locked On NHL feeds on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please do hit that subscribe button for Locked On Boston Bruins as well. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Have a great weekend, friends. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.